Hello Hecate devotees, witches, and fellow occultists alike. Today's video is me talking about my path with Hecate. I've been making videos, so I'm sure you're wondering who the hell is this crazy lady sitting here telling me how to do rituals. So I figured I'd give you a little bit of background about myself. When I was 15, I was invited to my first Yule Circle, and I loved it. So I wanted to learn more about becoming a pagan and what that meant. And so I did, and I loved Tolkien at the time. So I started to read the Silmarillion and worship the Tolkien gods for a little bit. And then when I grew older, I started to participate in covens, one in particular, Wolf and Stag, and I enjoyed that. I learned how to just break everything down into goddess and god worship and focus that way. But it wasn't enough for me because covens are great if you're a social person. I am not a social person. So I needed one-on-one learning. After that, I grew up a little. I got married. I moved to the high desert. When I moved to the high desert, I went to my first Ostara ritual. Didn't particularly enjoy that one. So me and my friends ended up going to the local pagan shop, Desert Sage. When I went in there, we stayed for their Ostara ritual. I loved it. It felt like home. There was a particular statue there. I fell in love with her, and I found out that the owner of the shop was a Hecate worshiper, and that was her statue. So I wanted to learn more about it, and she was telling me that her teacher did seminars and that he'd be teaching one shortly at her shop. So when he did have the opportunity to come again, I stayed for one of his seminars and we became friends. So for 10 years, he was my teacher. That would be Jade Soul Luna. And I learned a lot about Hecate and myself and doing a lot of inner work. His background was he studied under Agori and started worshiping Kali, and then his teacher told him to come to the West. And he started developing the correlation between Kali and Hecate. So a lot of my background from learning through him is how to do inner work and break yourself down so you no longer fear your own mortality, your own shortcomings, trying not to judge people because you never know where they are in their walk of life and how they got there. Just doing a lot of inner work. That's what I did for 10 years. And that's very serious. I of course, learned through book knowledge, but more importantly, I practice what I preach. I literally went out there and did these hard, complicated rituals. For example, there was one mantra I had to say 3,000 times a day for 2 weeks in the cemetery to worship Hecate. That particular mantra was to turn lust into love. And at that time in my life, I was maybe 3 years into my worship and work with her. I was a little bit lost as how to really, embrace her. I did this ritual and I saw amazing wildlife. You see actual life of the people who work there at the cemetery, and you see mourning and you see all sorts of things. And I saw in a vision after doing that work there, Hecate come to me as my physical mother. Now, when I was 9, my mother died of breast cancer. And since then, death's always kind of been there in my life. Raising animals, life and death happens. And so when I was there in the cemetery doing that work, I saw a vision of rotted blue skin, her jaw removed, mist for breath coming out. She communicated telepathically. She had red hair just like my mother. And I just felt this kind of peace over me. And when I told my teacher about it, he said, Catonia is that form that she guards bones and deals with earthly affair and karma, and that she was one of the harder aspects of Hecate to worship, because you are dealing with trauma and so much grief that is here on the earthly planet, dealing with people's emotions. So I was like, no, I want that. That's what I want to do. I want to connect death with life. So I worked more on myself, trying to get rid of my own fears and shortcomings. I still have self-confidence issues. I think everybody at one point in time in their life does. But it's called working on yourself. So my background with Hecate is more Hindu, Agori, Tantric traditions, doing mantras, having a mala or a rosary to count your prayers, doing ritual work to try to get her attention and her approval and her, to tell her that thank you. And I hope that you love me as your child and will teach me this way. So that's what I did for 10 years. And I learned astrology because that's really important when you do some of these rituals. 'Cause I had to know when the Scorpio moon was. And I had to know when eclipses happened. And you had to correlate actual astronomy with planetary junctions in charts to get everything to work right, to open up gates that wouldn't normally be open, so you can have that communication with your deity and they will be able to tell you that experience, because you got to work for it. It's not, oh, I'm going to be lazy and I'm going to expect somebody to give me something. No, she demands that you self-sacrifice yourself, not physically, but internally and emotionally, that you say, okay, all right, I'm ready to learn this lesson. I'm ready to listen to you. And then she'll be like, okay, you're ready? Well, here's the sign. So I did that work. I had had days where I had to fast all day. I have had days where I've had to be completely silent. With a family, that's very hard to do. I've had days where I had to be isolated and not talk to anybody all day and go out in the middle of the night and do a 1,000-round, mantra to her. So I have put in dedication and work. So then after 10 years and learning with my old teacher, we split ways because of personal reasons. And from then, I had to build myself up and rediscover who I was as a person, as a witch, and who, build myself up from the ground worshiping. Because if you've seen in the very first videos that I've done, that was all work with my teacher, and it was hard to start over again. But I found a group of women in a theatrical group that I hung with that were great people, and we got along fantastically, and they were open-minded. I worked for anthropological professors who had a haunted house, a haunted attraction. And they were, like I said, really open-minded. They had antiques. They were into paranormal. So they allowed me a little freedom there to work with Hecate. What I did was pretty much open a gate to allow her to feed off of that fear and energy, to have people work through it as they went through their haunted attraction and had to actually face these elements physically. You're getting spooked, and you're having to deal with internally, like, oh shit, what do I do, and how do I escape this? And it brings a very deep energy and presence, and Hecate loved it in there. She fed off of it. And I also worked with the old energy from the antiques, and I also worked with I pulled in spirits and asked if they wanted to work, and asked if they wanted that connection there. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to see the ritual that I did, my video Eclipse 2016 is that actual me doing that ritual. So I worked there, and like I said, she loved it, and I grew as a witch, and I started to understand that my work was really as a necromancer. Not as what is a necromancer, you might ask. It is somebody who works with the dead to try to hear them, to try to communicate them with the living. Usually, in definition, it's to get prophecies for the future, for their own betterment. But for me, I don't want to use it that way. I know Hecate has my future in store, not personally, what she's going to do to me, but I'm comfortable enough to know whenever the hell my time is up, it's in her hands. So why go mess with it? So in necromancy, what I do is I listen to the past and any information that the spirit wants to communicate, that they might feel valuable or important to the living. And that's what I did when I worked there at the haunted attraction. Try to listen for that. And activity got really nice and heavy. But then, of course, at that time, relationships go downhill really quick when things get intense. And I had to pull out of the relationship and stop doing that. So then that left me the last year where I have just rediscovered myself, like I said, as a necromancer with Hecate, trying to communicate the her spiritual plane, whatever is out there with the earthly connection, because I worship her in the chthonic form. Bones are beneath us. We walk on them all the time. Thousands of years. It's undeniable. I mean, we use petrol, which is made out of dinosaurs. And our beaches are made out of thousands of crushed shells that came from animals once. So we are part of the chthonic realm, whether we, think about it or not. Of course, Hecate rules more than just earthly realm. This is just what I particularly communicate with her. So yeah, that's been my experience with her. So have I written any books? One children's book, because I really feel that we need to start helping our next generation think about these things and address it in a non-fearful way. So have I ever taught anybody? Not personally. I figure if Hecate wants me to teach somebody, they will come into my life it'll be obvious. Because I've worked my ass off for dedication for years, for 15 years, been in love with my goddess. I was initiated by my teacher on Halloween when I was 6 months pregnant with my daughter. So my life, everything, my kids, everything has been a product of Hecate. And so that's been my life. She's been my life. And through my art, everything's connected with her. And like I said, I hope that this video finds you well. I hope that it helps you understand where I come from when I talk in my videos, that I may not be out there in the pagan world so much, but I have had a little bit experience. I do practice what I preach, and I hope this video finds you well. And I hope, you know, if you want to ever share your stories of how you became a Hecate worshiper or a witch in general, I would love to hear it. So have a good day.